Before any human existence, when time had not yet marked history, heaven was pure splendor and harmony. Radiant angels celebrated the Creator with reverence and joy. But among all of them, there was one being who stood out in an incomparable way: Lucifer. According to the sacred accounts, he was the anointed cherub, the most perfect, the wisest, and the most beautiful of all creation. His radiance was so intense that it caught the attention of everyone around him, and his honor was second only to God's. Like a sculptor proud of his greatest masterpiece, the Creator granted Lucifer abilities that no other angel possessed: extraordinary intelligence, unmatched power, and a place of great honor in the celestial hierarchy. For a time, everything seemed perfect. However, the same freedom that allows an angel to glorify God can also make room for something terrible. Amid so much light, a seed of pride and envy began to sprout in Lucifer's heart, gradually transforming his nature. When that pride finally blossomed, his rebellion shook heaven completely. That creation, which had once been a model of virtue, became the source of the evil that would spread throughout the world. It was thus that the light-bearer transformed into the adversary, dragging along with him 1/3 of the angels who chose to follow him. The scar left by that betrayal remains a reminder that even the brightest of stars can fall into darkness. But how, exactly, did that fall happen? What turned God's most perfect creation into the enemy we know as Satan? That is what we will discover in this video. Welcome, friends. This is the Mysteries of Faith channel. I humbly ask you to like this video and help me reach 1,000 subscribers. It is a pleasure to make another one for you. You already know the figure of Satan as the great enemy of good, but how did he get to that point? Where did it all begin? Why did the heart of such an admired angel fill with pride to the point of shaking all of heaven? Before peace was broken, the celestial realm functioned in perfect harmony. Each angel had a mission, and there were different orders to fulfill God's purposes. The seraphim, for example, are described as living flames, always praising the Creator without rest. Just below them, the cherubim, guardians of divine secrets and protectors of wisdom. Then came the archangels, like Michael and Gabriel, who carried crucial messages and defended justice. Finally, the angels closest to us, who accompany us in our daily lives, ensuring our protection. Lucifer belonged to the order of cherubim, and his role was grand. He was seen as a natural leader, radiating beauty and wisdom so intensely that he won everyone's respect. As he led the celestial choirs, his voice resonated like a light that guided the other angels in their praise of the Creator. However, the very splendor that set him apart ended up nurturing a silent pride. Little by little, Lucifer became fascinated with his own brilliance, and that vanity began to corrupt his heart. From that moment on, the desire to exalt himself surpassed the devotion he had for heaven. That which God had created as something good was transformed into vanity and ambition, paving the way for revolt. Lucifer began to question his place, dreaming of raising his throne above the stars. And so, what was once a realm of peace trembled, and evil took its first step in history. Jesus himself stated in a striking way, "I saw Satan fall from heaven like lightning." In a single moment, Lucifer was cast into the depths, stripped of the light that once enveloped him. His glory was completely extinguished, and that morning star ceased to shine. But how could such a drastic fall occur? Despite his enormous influence, Lucifer appears little in the Holy Scriptures, usually in brief and symbolic passages. To understand how the great celestial rebellion was triggered, besides the Bible, we turn to other works such as History of the Angelic World by Father José Antonio Fortea and the writings of St. Augustine. In these texts, Lucifer represents the quest of someone who, blinded by his own brilliance, sought to equal the Creator and was therefore expelled from the divine presence. But how did his corruption begin? In the beginning, pride arose as a subtle thought. Lucifer wondered if he could shine even brighter, free from any submission. That idea, almost imperceptible, grew within his heart. While heaven continued in perfect harmony, Lucifer, increasingly distant, nurtured an inner flame of ambition. Some angels even noticed his change. His gaze became colder, and his voice, once so resplendent in the choirs, began to fall silent. Once, Gabriel, noticing his discomfort, asked him, "Lucifer, what troubles your light?" However, Lucifer dodged the question, hiding his inner turmoil. Day after day, he neglected his own duties, and the other angels missed his song. In praise meetings, where he once led with enthusiasm, he now participated without emotion, displaying a mix of haughtiness and resentment. It is worth remembering that heaven did not impose chains. Each angel had the freedom to choose to serve God with genuine love. In that environment, Lucifer began to attract curious glances. Some angels, fascinated by his charisma, lent an ear to his discontent. On one occasion, a cherub asked if he no longer found joy in singing. Lucifer smiled faintly and replied that perhaps there was something greater beyond that continuous adoration. Then, within him, the spark transformed into a blaze. Lucifer decided that he would ascend above the clouds and be like the Most High. At that moment, the brilliance that made him the light-bearer turned into a flame of ambition. Paradise, once invulnerable, felt the first tremor of rebellion. The one who once illuminated the heavens with praises was preparing to confront the Creator himself, forever changing the history of the universe. Even among so many strong and wise angels, Lucifer's words stood out in a special way. He spoke of the Creator as no one had ever done before, with sincerity, charisma, and an authority that seemed natural. The angels were not naive, but they were enchanted by the inspiring way Lucifer described the divine greatness. It seemed that by listening to him, they glimpsed a new light, as strong as it was fleeting, like a shooting star in the sky. His goodness, respect, and influence seemed perfectly deserved, confirming why God praised him so much in the book of Job. And even when his heart began to stray, the power that God had given him did not cease to exist. It only changed direction. Then the Creator called him privately. In a deep silence, God's voice resounded with love and patience. "Lucifer, my son, I feel that your thoughts are drifting away from me. In your heart, there are ideas that lead you away from the eternal." With the calm that still enveloped him, Lucifer replied, "Father, did you not create me to explore and understand? How could it be wrong to want to better comprehend your work?" God's sorrow was veiled yet real. He knew that the freedom he had given his children could generate, even in the purest places, small seeds of pride. Then he continued, "Lucifer, your desire to know is good when guided by love, but I see that your thoughts are turning toward yourself. Remember, the light that shines in you is a reflection of my love, not something you created on your own." Lucifer lowered his gaze, feeling at once misunderstood and wounded in his pride. He would not admit to wanting something beyond what God himself had given him, yet deep down, he was fascinated by his own beauty and intelligence. Seeing his inner conflict, God extended his hand once more. "My son, if you turn back to me, your splendor will remain true and grow in harmony with heaven. Do not let your heart be enveloped in shadows." However, instead of feeling peace, Lucifer experienced a discomfort he did not fully understand. Why so many warnings? Did God not trust his loyalty? He withdrew respectfully, but within him, the pride only grew. Over time, Lucifer continued to lead the celestial choirs, but he no longer marveled as before at the divine glory. His heart was divided, trying to understand just how far he could go. Again, God called him, "Lucifer, I see the path you have taken, and it saddens me. Your light risks becoming darkness, but there is still time, my son, to return." This time, Lucifer refused to listen. He believed he deserved more. He felt that somehow his greatness was not being recognized. Then he began to justify his thoughts. Am I not worthy of something greater? Finally, the Creator, in his infinite compassion, warned him one last time. I will never turn away from you, but you are free to choose. With these words, heaven witnessed the growing tension between humility and pride in Lucifer's heart. And, little by little, that spark of discontent would transform into the flame of rebellion. Are you enjoying the story of Lucifer? Comment below from which city you are watching this video. Perhaps you are even very close to me. Continuing, God's pain was deep as he offered Lucifer another chance. He knew he risked losing his masterpiece, but he respected the freedom he had granted to every angel. Even in the face of the possibility of a fall, the Creator kept in his heart an unshakable love. I will love him even if he turns away from me, he thought as he watched Lucifer drift apart. All of heaven remained in silent expectation, for a crucial revelation was approaching, bringing with it a great challenge not only for Lucifer, but for all the angels. To give Lucifer the opportunity to grow in humility, God delayed that moment. He called him again in a tone full of care. My son, soon the day will come when you will be put to the test. The tensions within you may be as intense as a storm. Strengthen your heart in obedience, for the test will demand much of you. Lucifer knelt before the Creator, affirming his desire to be faithful. Father, I want to obey. My greatest longing is to be loyal. My love for you still burns within me. He spoke sincerely, yet the seed of pride continued to grow in his thoughts. Am I not the brightest? With each postponement of the great revelation, God offered him more time to reflect, hoping that humility would find room to bloom in his heart. Finally, the Creator decided that all of heaven needed to know his plan. Then, he gathered all the celestial hosts. In a reverent silence, God's presence shone with absolute splendor. His voice filled the firmament like a serene thunder. My beloved angels, I now create a material universe. It will be a vast realm of stars, planets, and galaxies where life will reflect my love in a unique way. The angels beheld the vision unfolding before them. Stellar systems dancing in harmony, and in one of those worlds, Earth, destined to welcome a special creation. Then God continued, I will make beings in my image and likeness, humans. They will carry within them both earth and heaven. They will have body and soul. And, more than that, I myself will become flesh. The second person of the Trinity, my own Son, will be called Jesus Christ and will dwell among them, and you will worship me in that human form. The surprise overwhelmed everyone. Many angels rejoiced immediately, amazed by the divine wisdom. But, silently, Lucifer felt his heart falter. That test, so long announced by God, had finally arrived, and Lucifer's reaction to the Creator's plan would forever change the destiny of both the heavens and the earth. When God revealed his plan to become human, and moreover to sacrifice himself for humanity, all of heaven filled with admiration. The angels celebrated that unexpected act of love, feeling honored to witness such a grand mystery. But amidst the commotion, there was one angel who did not bow or show joy: Lucifer. His heart hardened upon hearing that he was to worship the Creator in human form. For him, that seemed an unacceptable humiliation. With every word of God about incarnating, suffering, and dying for humans, something within Lucifer rebelled. He questioned why the perfect being would place himself in a mortal condition and why such exalted spiritual beings should revere someone made of flesh. More than that, he felt envy. If the Creator desired to unite with one of his creatures, why hadn't he chosen the most splendid of all angels? This thought generated bitterness in his chest, causing him to rise and utter a single word that echoed through the heavens. No. The Creator, full of compassion, looked at him with sadness, but Lucifer repeated his protest even more firmly. His voice, once beautiful, now sounded cold and defiant. Then he turned to the crowd of angels, questioning, "Do you understand what God asks of us? He wants us to bow before inferior beings. Should we really accept that?" His words, laden with persuasion, spread doubt. Many angels, admiring the one who had always been the brightest, began to waver. It seemed logical to think that spiritual beings of such purity should not bow before a material form, even more so if that form, according to the prophecy, would eventually be tainted by the sin of humanity. At that moment, a voice cut through the silence like a flash. Who is like God? It was Archangel Michael, of a lower rank than Lucifer, but endowed with unshakable faith. In 3 words, he exposed the root of Lucifer's error. No one, however splendid, can equal the Creator. The impact of that phrase made the hearts of all the angels tremble. It recalled the deepest meaning of worship, reminding them that in the divine presence there is no room for pride. Enraged, Lucifer cast a look of hatred at Michael, surprised to be challenged so directly. But Michael stepped forward now with a firm and fearless voice. "Your pride has blinded you, Lucifer. Your light turned to darkness when you tried to take the place that belongs only to God." From that confrontation emerged 2 clear choices for the angels. Follow the one who resisted the divine will, or remain by the side of the Creator, acknowledging him as the absolute sovereign. It was thus that the seed of rebellion fully sprouted in Lucifer's heart. What began with discreet doubts and secret desires transformed into an open challenge. The most handsome angel of heaven, consumed by his own brilliance, initiated a rupture that would forever change celestial history and the destiny of the universe. Lucifer felt his inner self ignite when he heard Michael's words echo throughout heaven, revealing to all the pride that was growing in his heart. A wave of fury and shame overwhelmed him, and his gaze filled with contempt. He tried to maintain his haughty posture, but his voice trembled slightly as he responded, "Michael, you are blind. Don't you see they ask us for something absurd? That I, the first in glory, should kneel before what is fragile and transient? That is not devotion. It is humiliation." Michael remained steadfast, radiating a nearly palpable serenity. In his eyes, there was both compassion and determination. Lucifer, God does not lower himself by becoming human. He chooses to come near us out of love. You, however, are so fascinated by your own brilliance that you refuse to accept being lesser than you imagine. You forgot that all your splendor comes from him. Those words struck Lucifer like a sharp blade, revealing the shadow that had grown within him. In silence, he withdrew, head held high, yet corroded by an anger he could no longer hide. Alone, he expressed his rage in tears, not of sorrow, but of a hatred driven by wounded pride. "God asks us for the impossible," he muttered under his breath, reflecting on the idea of worshiping a being who would allow himself to be crucified by inferior creatures. How can we, made of light, submit to a mortal flesh, to a body that bleeds and suffers? Is it our lot to venerate such weakness? His words, as they spread, sounded less like a discourse of hatred and more like a defense of one's own dignity. He spoke of freedom, of the right of each angel to grow without having to bow to an apparently inferior form. Lucifer's logic was seductive. If God had given them free will, why not use it to choose one's own path? Why not aspire to something beyond that eternal service? Little by little, Lucifer's army took shape. Curiously, it was not unprepared or insignificant angels who followed him, but precisely the most powerful ones, those whose beauty and intelligence stood out. They were attracted by the promise of achieving a higher status, free from any submission. Their individual lights, once brilliant, began to mix with the darkness of pride. And so, the first great rift in heaven was being drawn, led by the one who was once the morning star. Now, I ask you watching, who would you be in this scenario? Michael, who was not the strongest but the one most reverent toward God, or Lucifer, who despite his power was completely selfish? Let me know in the comments. In one of the gatherings among the rebellious angels, Lucifer positioned himself before all with unquestionable, imposing presence. His voice thundered like a clap of thunder. We represent the new future. We are the light that does not bend. If the Creator does not grant us the position we deserve, we will take that glory into our own hands. Lucifer's words vibrated with such force that many angels felt their innermost being tremble. He spoke of freedom and greatness, and his charisma enveloped everyone present in an aura of questioning. Thus, the first army in heaven turned against God. The most powerful angels, once known for their loyalty and incomparable beauty, united with Lucifer. The firmament, which had always been full of harmony, began to echo with rumors of war. At the other end of heaven, Michael rose, determined and courageous. Small in comparison to many other angels, but driven by unyielding faith, he raised his sword and repeated his cry, "Who is like God?" Those three simple, yet profoundly true words shook those who were still in doubt. Michael, humble and resolute, positioned himself at the forefront of the loyal angels. He understood that the rebels were numerous and powerful, but he did not hesitate. His strength came directly from love and trust in the Creator. Then began the battle that divided heaven. On one side, Lucifer and his followers, whose light had turned into darkness, wrapped in pride. On the other, Michael, leading the loyal angels, holding his sword with firmness and faith. Pure hearts, strengthened by the divine presence, faced the fury of their former brothers. Flashes of light ran across the firmament each time swords clashed, like shooting stars in an intense combat. Lucifer, overcome with rage, tried by all means to supplant Michael. His power was immense, but his light was distorted by hatred, and the words he shouted, once full of wisdom, now sounded empty and filled with contempt. I was the first. I am the one and only true light. Yet Michael remained unshaken. He did not fight for his own glory, but for loyalty and love for the Creator. The conviction that divine goodness would always triumph strengthened every blow he struck. The war continued until the strength of the faithful prevailed. Raising his sword, Michael cried out one last time, "By the power of God, begone!" And at that moment, the darkness that enveloped Lucifer dissipated, carrying away the rebellious army with it. Thrown far from heaven, Lucifer, now known as Satan, and his host fell like shooting stars, bringing about their own ruin. In an instant, paradise fell silent once more, but not without a deep wound. 1/3 of the angels had chosen the path of rebellion. Despite the sorrow, the loyal angels felt that the light had triumphed. Michael's humility and devotion proved that the supreme power does not lie in hierarchy or imposing presence, but in the certainty that God is incomparable in goodness. The question, "Who is like God?" echoed throughout the universe, reminding everyone that nothing, not even the most intense brilliance, can overshadow divine love. Peace returned to heaven, now marked by the memory of the battle that showed the unsurpassable strength of fidelity and truth. When the war reached its climax, heaven itself opened to banish Lucifer and the angels who followed him. Those who once held prominent positions in the celestial court, shining like first-rate stars, were expelled like incandescent meteors toward complete darkness. The morning star, now renamed Satan, felt in his very essence the weight of that moment. The loss of divine communion became a pain that surpassed any physical suffering. That exile was not yet the definitive hell, but a state of absolute separation from the Creator, where the peace and brilliance of yesteryear could no longer be beheld. For Satan, that dark abyss signified a radical change of purpose. Unable to remain in God's presence, his embittered heart found a new reason to exist, to harm the divine work whenever possible. If he could no longer attain supreme glory, then he would turn his fury against that which God loved most, humanity. He saw in human beings, made in the image and likeness of the Creator, the perfect target to pour out his rancor. In his distorted logic, they were God's favorites, and Satan would do everything to pull them away from divine love, corrupting and dragging them away from the light. Thus, evil came to act as an active force in the world, ceasing to be merely the absence of good. 1/3 of the angels, now called demons, followed Satan in that purpose of fomenting pride, envy, greed, and all sorts of temptations among men. God, in his justice and love, allowed the decision of those rebellious angels to have definitive consequences. If they chose to reject the light, they could not remain where holiness and the fullness of good reigned. Even so, the Creator did not annihilate them. He let them exist in the dark condition they themselves had embraced. That is how an equilibrium was established between divine justice, which does not admit sin before His glory, and the love that continues to respect the freedom of each creature. The story of Lucifer, who became Satan, does not end with the fall. His actions extend to the present day, affecting the relationship between good and evil in the universe. Every act of temptation and rebellion finds its root in him, but it is up to each human being, endowed with free will, to decide whether to yield to that destructive impulse. Even today, Michael's question continues to echo, "Who is like God?" A constant reminder that no matter how intense the onslaughts of evil may be, the love and truth of the Creator ultimately prevail. Since he was expelled from heaven, Satan has pursued the same objective: to divert people's hearts from God. Throughout the Scriptures, we find accounts of his activity as the great tempter, willing to confront not only anonymous figures, but also those chosen for special missions. The most striking example is found in the New Testament when he tempts Jesus in the desert. After 40 days and 40 nights of fasting, the Son of God faces Satan face to face. The enemy, cunning, begins by offering what seems most urgent: food, suggesting that Jesus turns stones into bread. Next, he appeals to vanity, urging him to leap from the pinnacle of the temple so that angels might save him publicly. Finally, he shows him all the kingdoms of the world and promises to give them, provided that Jesus kneels and worships him. In that instant, Satan reveals his ultimate intention: to receive the worship that only God deserves. These episodes illustrate Satan's main tactic: to exploit human weaknesses, be they physical, emotional, or spiritual. He persists in sowing doubts about divine goodness and sovereignty, provoking pride or despair. However, Jesus responds with firmness and faithfulness to the Father, reminding us all that no matter how insistent evil may be, trust in God has the power to resist any temptation. Thus, the ancient battle of heaven continues on earth. Satan, fallen and driven by envy, seeks to corrupt God's children, but divine love and the grace granted to human beings provide the necessary weapons to overcome him. The conflict between good and evil, initiated in Lucifer's rebellion, remains alive. But one thing is certain: the divine light is always present, ready to rescue and strengthen those who choose to remain faithful. Ultimately, however loud evil may be, it cannot overcome the power of the unconditional love that comes from the Creator, and that, in itself, confirms the truth proclaimed by Michael: who is like God? After 40 days and 40 nights of fasting, Jesus meets Satan in the desert. There, the enemy challenges him, offering 3 tempting paths. 1. Transforming stones into bread, appealing to Jesus' hunger. 2. Leaping from the highest point of the temple, expecting angels to save him and demonstrate his power publicly. 3. Receiving all the kingdoms of the world in exchange for worshiping Satan. Each proposal exalts pride, showmanship, or an unbridled pursuit of power. However, Jesus responds firmly, using the scriptures as his shield and making it clear that only God deserves worship. In doing so, he shows us that true power does not come from spectacular miracles or the imposition of force, but from loving obedience to God. Another narrative of resistance to evil is found in the book of Job. In that account, Satan questions Job's faith, suggesting that he only loved God because he was blessed and protected. Then, Job faces terrible losses: family, health, material possessions, and his suffering becomes almost unbearable. Even amid deep doubts and pain, Job remains faithful. He questions, weeps, and laments, but does not deny God's sovereignty. In the end, it becomes clear that his love did not depend solely on blessings. It was a genuine faith that withstood the storm. Satan fails, proving himself incapable of destroying a heart that remains anchored in God, even in the midst of suffering. After his expulsion, Lucifer's first great act, now as Satan, took place in Eden, where God had created the perfect setting for the human race to begin its journey. Taking the form of a serpent, he approached Eve and sowed doubt. Did God really say that you must not eat from any tree in the garden? With that question, Satan took the first step to corrupt the innocence of Adam and Eve, suggesting that God was hiding something from them. The promise of being like God proved irresistible to the first couple, who chose to disobey the Creator. Thus, the fall in Eden brought the shadow of sin into the world, fulfilling Satan's plan to separate humanity from its original state of full communion with God. From Eden to our days, Satan's action remains a constant conflict in human life. His temptations take diverse forms: pride, envy, greed, but the motivation is always the same: to separate man from God and plunge him into darkness. However, every biblical story of resistance to evil reminds us that, in the end, good has the last word. The humble faith of Job or the firm response of Jesus shows that the light remains accessible to all who seek it. In the last book of the Bible, Revelation, Satan appears as the great dragon, a symbol of deceptive and destructive power. There, he is described as one who deceives the whole world, revealing his relentless focus on corrupting and dominating creation. The prophecies in Revelation show that, in the last days, evil will try to reach its peak, intensifying the confrontation between darkness and light. However, even amidst visions of cosmic battles, there is the certainty that final triumph belongs to the Creator. The dragon, who was once the morning star, will never be able to equal God. His defeat is foretold as inevitable. This outcome confirms that, no matter how terrifying evil's blows may be, good remains invincible, for it is supported by God's infinite goodness. The book of Revelation describes a critical period in human history, marked by disasters and trials. It is during this phase that the world is divided between those who follow God and those who surrender to the wiles of evil. Satan reemerges in his role as the great deceiver, trying to divert humanity from the truth and draw it toward chaos. At the climax of the narrative, Revelation reveals a decisive battle between the celestial forces, led by Michael and Satan himself. That struggle represents the continuation of the conflict that began when Lucifer rebelled in heaven and was expelled. Now, in the final moments, he seeks one last attempt to usurp the divine glory. Supported by dark allies such as the beast, and the false prophet. These powers, influenced by Satan, rise to spread idolatry and corruption, forming a kingdom that distortedly imitates God's reign. Revelation, however, leaves no doubt. After these trials, the power of evil is definitively overcome. Satan is cast into the lake of fire, from where he can no longer threaten creation or corrupt souls. In that act of justice, evil is annihilated, and human freedom is finally freed from the deceiver, confirming God's sovereignty. For the Christian faith, that final defeat of Satan symbolizes the certainty that, despite all the violence and deception he may cause, his time is short and his power limited. The final victory of good does not occur solely by force, but above all through the truth, love, and justice that emanate from God. This hope for full restoration and re-encounter with the divine light strengthens the faithful to face the temptations and challenges of the present. What did you think of the story of Lucifer? Please comment below. I humbly ask you to like this video, share it with your friends, and help me reach 1,000 subscribers. I am leaving 2 special videos for you at the end. Thank you very much. May God bless you, and see you next time.